What a mess! There are pieces everywhere. Today, we're going to talk about forking, which is a little bit like double attack. The only difference is, forking is usually done by knights and sometimes pawns.
Hello.
It kind of depends on who you ask, but it's going to be very similar to our last video. In this chess position, don't forget that white's pawns are traveling up the screen. After all, they did start on the number 2. Let's focus on the one white pawn that I gave him. How can that white pawn aim at 2 black pieces at once? Well, this is surely the easiest question you're going to get today, because there's only one move that pawn can make, and when we go to the square g6, we're aiming at both black knights. A chess master would say that we are forking the knights. If you were to also say that we are double attacking the knights, well, that'd be right also. Let's go back though. A true fork always uses a knight. Where can white move his knight? To aim at the entire black army. Well, I wouldn't go to the square e5. If you went there, there's actually 2 attackers, 1, 2, and only 1 white piece is defending, and we know 2 against 1 by now is not good for the side with 1. Instead, I'm sure you found the correct move, which also, by the way, happens to be a move in the center of the board. Remember how we said how strong knights can be in the middle? When the knight goes to d4, we're aiming at practically every piece that black cares about. We're aiming at the king, the rook, and truthfully, we don't care about the rooks. We care about the queen. Just aiming at the king and the queen is enough. When black gets his king out of danger, I know we're going to capture that queen, and we have $9 in our pocket that we didn't have a couple of seconds ago. There are a couple of other double attacks here, so just for review, you may have noticed the move rook to d3. That aims at the king and the queen. The other rook could of course go to the square d3 with similar results. Or this rook could capture on f5. That makes a double attack of the king and the knight. Not sure you want to capture the knight because it has a defender, but it does count as a fork. And also in this position, your bishop could come capture this pawn, which is a double attack of this rook and this knight. What I'd like to show you now are the most common knight forks that happen early on in a chess game. What I'm about to show you is almost certainly the most common fork in all of kids' chess. If white plays the move knight to g5, black actually has some serious problems. There are 2 attackers on that pawn, and I only see 1 defender. If black doesn't realize what's going on, maybe he brings his bishop off the back row. If I was white, I would not capture with the bishop, I'd capture with the knight, because when you do so, you make a fork. You're aiming at the queen, and you're aiming at the rook. Of course, he's going to save his queen, and when he does, we capture the rook, and look at there. We've already captured a rook and a pawn. 6 extra points really early in the game. White usually goes on to win this one. If f7 is the most popular fork square on the right side of the board, then surely c7 is the most popular fork square on the left side. Notice nothing is guarding c7, and we all know by now bad things happen to pieces that don't have friends. Also notice that black's queen is out in the open early. We've seen some dangers about that before. So the best move for white is to bring his knight to the square d5, which by the way is already 1 fork. We're aiming at the queen, and we're aiming at the pawn. I know we're aiming at the bishop, but look how many defenders that bishop has. The king, both knights, and the queen. I don't think we're going to be capturing that bishop anytime soon. If black doesn't realize what's going on and slides his queen over, then our knight takes this pawn, and it's a real fork of the king and the rook. The king must move, we capture the rook on the next turn, and just like before, we've got 6 extra points in our pocket really early in the game. Let's go back, and before we close today, let's see if we can figure out how to defend against a fork. If you were black here, where could you move your queen to also defend this pawn? Did you find the move queen to d6? I hope so. Now there's 1 attacker on the pawn, but there's 1 defender. And if it's 1-to-1, the defending side is okay. Not every fork is going to win pieces. If you're defending, see if you can move 1 piece to guard the other, and you might just be able to get out of a fork. Well, chess kids, I couldn't let you go today without showing you my favorite fork puzzle. This is actually the end of a longer puzzle, but I only want to show you this part. It looks like black's doing better. Both sides have 2 pawns, but black has a rook against a knight. A rook is usually worth more than a knight, especially with all this open space. But black has to move next, and I think you're realizing that he's got to move his rook. Well, it seems like any old square will do, but wait a minute, there aren't that many squares he can use. We're going to put a red box on every single square he can move to, and hopefully I can show you that every one is bad. If he goes to this square, the white pawn on a3 will capture him. If he goes to this square, the king will capture him. Same with this one. If he goes to this one or this one, the white knight will just take him right away. If he goes to this one or this one, same story, the knight will just capture him. Now that leaves a lot of possibilities remaining, but guess what? There's a fork at every turn. If we go to the square b3, let's go ahead and put the rook on that square so you can see it. Where can white move his knight to aim at the king and the rook? We have a fork on c5, you've got it. Black must move his king out of check. I would capture with my knight, and we won 5 points for free. Let's try again. What if the rook travels to the square b7? Well, it's the same answer. Knight to c5 forks the king and the rook. One more option remaining. The rook can travel to the square d5. Now, our knight travels to b6 and makes yet another fork. There's just no other move for that black rook. We didn't talk about f5, but I know you realize the pawn could just capture. There is simply no good rook move. Thanks to all of these knight forks, black is definitely going down. Knights are the trickiest pieces to move in chess, kids, and if you can find a way for your knight to aim at 2 pieces at once, you'll be tricking your opponents and winning material in no time. Just like the fork you eat with. Stab 2 pieces at once, and you will never be hungry.